Please, did you see the email?
Who's sharing this one? Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, great. You can proceed. You already have people here.
Okay. Are all the panelists there, or is this just one person?
Yeah, so I think there's one more person on Zoom. There's one person seated here.
Okay.
So you have 15 minutes for each presentation. 15.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, if Omalara Loco is there, I think we can begin. We are going to take 15 minutes for each presentation. Hello, yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So Omalara Loco's presentation, I think we'll begin with it. Continuity and discontinuity of music in the Great Commission exercises. 15 minutes is what each person has, and I think we'll try to keep to it. I'll pop up and just say I when it's about 1 minute left. I'll just say that. That's about it. Yeah, you can go ahead, please.
Can you hear us, please?
I can. If we're still having technical difficulties, I think we can start with someone in the room.
Okay.
Yeah, who is in the room right now? If there's still technical difficulties, and then we can come back so we don't waste time.
Second presenter.
Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes, we can. Yeah, so I think if Grace Olaoluwa might can speak.
Sorry, the glitch is also happening there. The network glitch.
All right. in the room.
Yeah, I can think you like. I can hear you. Can you hear us? Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
Let's start, please. You can start.
Am I starting?
Okay.
All right.
Yes. Can you please begin in the room so you can begin and then we'll figure it out as we go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My slides, are they there? Slide 1, yeah, it's downloading. Okay, my name is Grace Olaoluwa. I lecture in the University of Lagos, Creative Art Department Music Unit. The topic before me is metaphors of continuities and discontinuities in Tokumbo, a Yoruba art music composition. I think in the program Tokumbo was missing out. So Tokumbo is the piece of my discussion today. So slide 2, the word Tokumbo literally translates to overseas. It is a Yoruba coinage used to describe used products, second-hand items brought into Nigeria from overseas. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Slide 2. Yeah. In other words, second-hand goods and items imported into the country, mostly shipped, are called tokumbo. That's a Yoruba word. Tokumbo also denotes, male and female gender in terms of names. Basically, these people are usually born from overseas. It also used to connote interracial marriage from Nigeria with prefixes and suffixes, Ade Tokumbo, this Tokumbo, and so on and so forth. So Tokumbo, in my discourse this morning, is a Yoruba arts music choral work composed by Dayo Oyedo in the year 2003 as a fifth number in his hospital cantata. So Tokumbo in this piece denotes second-hand products from overseas. Tokumbo can be described as a musical composition in which the composer engages with ethical and cultural issues in a didactic way, specifically to fashion a critique on the purchasing of products or items used by white people from overseas, and the implication that even the second-hand products of white people are better than new local products or similar products that do not signal white cultural attachments. The story in the composition extends beyond the signification of used words and develops to Yoruba cultural values or expectations imposed by traditional beliefs and ideologies as regards to morals and ethics. Oyedo does this by developing a number of scenarios directed to four kinds of audiences. That's in the musical work. The first he addresses the general public. The second is to a lady. The third is to a married man, and the last is to a married woman. So I want to discuss Tokumbo in context. Slide 3, please. The first scenario is about the austere economic conditions in Nigeria that have resulted in many Nigerians preferring or settling for second-hand products from white people. He regards this as demeaning and something that should not be happening. The second scenario is a market scene, referring to Aleshinloye Market in Ibadan, that develops a conversation between three persons: a clothes seller, a lady who wants to purchase the clothes, and the lady's neighbor. The clothes seller advertises her wares, both new and second-hand wares, and the lady opts to purchase the second-hand clothes, saying it is the same as the new, and there isn't a visible difference. The neighbor advises her to buy the new clothes. Then the third scenario shifts to presenting examples of second-hand products like refrigerators that are defective and can lead to tragedies like the burning down of a house. Oyedu uses a man as a protagonist and a woman, his wife, as the antagonist in this scene. She sings of her husband who spends his salary to purchase a second-hand television that displays a rainbow-like image. Annoyed, she lashes out at him, calling him foolish and wretched and accusing him of accumulating debts. The fourth scenario revolves around a woman character. The composer here paints a typical picture of the expectations of a typical Yoruba man who considers a woman virtuous in the light of how she accepts and dispenses her responsibilities regarding house chores. The text is something like a prayer to be spared a woman who is culturally worthless, mentioning some of the values lacking in such a woman. She can't cook, she can't wash clothes, fetch water, split firewood, iron clothes, grind pepper, carry a baby on her back, or pound yam. She's a talkative. The text ends with this message: products already used by whites are not ours. So I go to slide 4. I'm going to just play some part of the music because it's 8 minutes long and time won't permit that. Slide 4, could you move to 1 minute and 0 seconds? So we could just have a feel of the music. The volume.
Can you hear Ansu?
Yes, we can. Yes.
How about again? move to 5 seconds and 5 minutes. Okay, I pause. Thank you. Okay, thank you. It's 8 minutes long. You could check it up on YouTube. So slide 5. I analyzed Sokumba within the context of Nigerian cultural values, traditional expectation, and modern living conventions. I examined the narrative and musical elements from the choral piece, Tokumbo. That's not possible. Yeah, I've just spent 7 minutes. I examined the narrative and musical elements from the choral piece, Tokumbo, as a metaphoric example of continuities and discontinuities that are binaries based on perception. This paper pitches from a standpoint that cultural beliefs regulate human principles, as well as human patterns of living and being, and so social change has over time influenced these beliefs. Slide 6. Here, this shows a musical example of the tone painting of austerity, which we've heard. Time will not permit me to say all of this, which I actually prepared to. But in actual fact, Oyedu amplifies the word austerity using both this truncated enunciation as well as contrasting literary runs in the piano accompaniment. The next slide. Another musical example here points on the change of tempo, which actually signifies every of the scene in the 4 acts. And here Oyedu also uses musical elements like parlando, harmonic configurations, harmonic colorations of the piano, chromatic settling of certain 7th chord, dominant 7th chord, from Neapolitan 6th chord. All of these are marked, but time won't permit us for all of those analysis. Slide 8, please. The conceptual framework draws from the concept of continuity and discontinuity to explain social change and understand the engagement of Tokumbo with ethical and cultural issues. Continuity from a general perspective refers to the view that development is a gradual, continuous process, while discontinuity refers to the view that development occurs in a series of distinct changes. Slide 9. That's a concept by Rules and Forty, which says that's not slide 9, please. Slide 8, I'm sorry. Slide 8. Yeah, thank you. So talks about from their work, which talks about evolutionary theory. A change is continuous when there's a continuous social learning between generations and among peers. And also that discontinuity is when there's a complete cessation of transmission. A choral piece as Tokumbo deals with a very problematic subject and could cause offense to any number of people in an audience, as well as go very well with another based on socialities and class. These kinds of continuities and discontinuities within a community that share cultural beliefs relay some binary oppositions, which is dictated by varying ideologies. The last scenario, for example, portrays a patriarchal system of Yoruba culture that sometimes relegates the role of a woman in the family to only household chores. In a modern society where gender roles are more fluid and contested, some cherished Yoruba cultural values can only be interpreted as misogynistic. It is not to say, however, that this is how the music is heard, is of course my reading. Audience members who associate with traditional values may consider Oyedun's music as morally instructive and didactic. Emmanuel, I think that's the next slide. It talks about cultural beliefs and how it regulates human principles as well as human patterns of living. And yes, thank you. And how the being and varying ideologies in a society. Okay, so sorry, I take that again. The perception of social change itself can be confusing as it has both negative and positive aspects and as it takes different connotations at different periods to people with varying ideologies in a society. I'll quickly read from one of my interviews. One of the conductors who had, staged this performance in 3 different places to 3 different audiences. Adeyemi Ogini mentioned that Tokumba, which I conducted at different scenarios, was received by audience in 3 different ways. In UCH, where you find music class people, that's lecturer, student, it was easier to laugh at. There is this part of the song, Oko mi gbowo osu, o lo si so Tokumbo, or a television, Ton Your Rainbow. Well, my husband received salary headed to second-hand market to buy a rainbow-like television or Alashiloye clothes. So now for a song like UCH audience, they would for a song like this, UCH audience would laugh. It doesn't matter if you patronize the market. We did the same song in Ladoja Mapo Hall, a public hall in Ibadan. The concert was sponsored by the governor. Think about the audience. Different political parties at the grassroots with market women and all that. When we got to that part in the song where we sing gleefully Gongosu, which means freaking idiot, the all went quiet. And remember the reason that the Gongosu is because the husband bought, a rainbow-like television, a second-hand product. You see, a lot of people there could identify with that because it is normal for them. So it's easier for the middle class who get by. You have a little bit of money and the rest and have choices, but some can't afford nothing and then find such music abusive to their personality. They went quiet, and you know what that means. So, well, it didn't explain the third anecdote, but the point here is that Tokumba could be heard differently by different class audience, sharing broad cultural parameters like language and listening culture. The second scene portrays a society where people are conscious of their social status and identity. Well, I have given us an example, explained, given a summary of the 3 scenes, but I would have loved to talk about, the way this music was perceived in different audiences. But I would round up by saying that one cannot but read the message as a thoroughly moralistic one, intended to critique the materialistic consumption generally, but specifically as it is directed towards the purchase of second-hand goods. The implication seems can be thoroughly destructive practice, and one can lose one's house. The message seems to be that people should work to attain the best and not be driven by materialistic desire to settle for second best. As set out in the beginning of this presentation, Tokumba is a metaphoric example of how continuities and discontinuities are binaries based on perceptions of cultural beliefs that regulate human principles, as well as their patterns of living and being. These beliefs are usually in a state of flux and affected by influences such as social changes, which happen over time. This music constructed in a musical composition on issues of self-respect, autonomy, with specific reference to economic austerity that has led Nigerians to purchasing used items from white people. The close reading of Oyedo music poses the question as to whether composers, that's going to art music compositions now, use composers' own use of Western musical idiom can be described as an investment in a second-hand product, a white cultural attachment with ethical and cultural implications directly contrary to the message the work wishes to convey. It is in this regard that the close reading of the music can assist such a conclusion, whereas much of Oyedun's writing is conventional. It is also original and inventive. The word painting, like we saw in austerity, its amplification by glittering runs is a case in point. The work itself, on a meta level, thus goes beyond the mere critique of what seems like a simple ethical equation. It encourages us to ask what, in fact, second-hand is, and what cultural contributions from colonial encounter extend through the vastly unequal economic conditions governing power relations between the West and Nigeria can be claimed as own. Oyedun seems to suggest in Tokumbo that musically the answer is far from clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so is there any other panelists in the room? I think we should just clear the room, and then if you come online and it works again. Oh, okay, yeah, she's back. This is Loco, I think, before we go back to the room. If you can try to speak now and it works, I think we can take you now. I can't see her from here, so please, if you can hear her speak, can you please let me know?
You can hear me.
Can you? Okay. Is the fourth panelist in the room? Okay. Can you speak now, ma'am? Can you? Okay, yes, you're good. Now I can hear you. Yeah. I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you now.
Speak on.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Is it my turn to present?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Dr. Loco Omolara Olatunbo from Lagos State University of Education. The title of my presentation is Continuity and Discontinuity of Music in the Great Commission Exercise in Lagos State. Straight to the introduction, the advent of Christian missionary in Nigeria in 1842 brought about the mission churches where we have the Anglican, the Methodist, the Baptist Church, and many other Orthodox churches. And then tracing back to the activities of this early missionary, one could say clearly that music was introduced and basically hymns in various churches. And Adedeji in February 2018 described gospel music as the type of music composed and performed by Christians, and the context suggests to be the message of salvation. And from the early times of evangelism in Nigeria, Christians who engage in evangelism explore music as one of the tools employed for the evangelism. Despite diversity, because when we look at Lagos State, which is the focus of this study, is many scholars have written a lot about Lagos State, and they have classified Lagos as multi-religious. And when you talk about the economy, Lagos State is very, very vibrant. And despite the diversity, Christianity thrives due to the vibrant evangelistic efforts of churches in Lagos State. Therefore, this study explores how music is used as a strategic tool for evangelism in Lagos. It also examines the enduring and stable musical elements of evangelism and the combination of the old and new musical practices that define the present landscape. Now, the concept of Great Commission. When we look, this was the final instruction of Jesus to his disciples based on three key actions: going, teaching, and baptizing. One could have seen clearly in Mark chapter 15, verse 15, Matthew 28, 18 to 20. They have defined what Great Commission, which is evangelism. And that is the focus of the study. Looking at the methodology, this study adopts a qualitative research approach. The method of data gathering includes literature review of both academic and theological articles and books. And interviews were conducted with pastors, music ministers, gospel artists, evangelists, and members of evangelism units in 3 different churches in Lagos State. And video recordings, social media content, and YouTube broadcasts of evangelistic events, such as Let's Baptist of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, were gathered for the study. Now, for this presentation, I came up with historical eras of evangelistic music in Lagos State. We have the missionary hymnal era. That was in 1900. We have the emergence of independent churches, which was from 1900 to 1960. The awakening of Pentecostal charismatic churches from 1970 to 1980. We have the media expansion, 1990 to 2000, and then the digital era and the global impact era, that is 2010 to 2020. But now we want music for evangelism. In the 70s to 90s, there is this old ways of using music to evangelize. This could be teen evangelism or the one-on-one evangelism. When we talk about the teen evangelism, here we can have groups of evangelistic teams going out to preach the gospel through the use of let me not say through the use, not only through the use of music, but with accompaniment of music. A very good example is, let me quickly come up with one good example of this presentation for the group. Hello?
We can still hear you.
And then I don't know if you can hear.
Yes, we can. Yes.
And then we have the street evangelism with live band. This is very, very prominent, where you have at the street corner of the city, you have the evangelist with some group of people And basically with live bands, the live bands may start with choruses to create awareness about the evangelism. And then we also have gospel artists through their recorded songs and also stage performances. These artists, for example, Bola Are, I can remember in those days when we were growing up, the record stores, you see the record stores playing most of it gospel artist music. And then we also have crusades and revival meetings where music is being employed as part of the meetings. And then we also have mobile and bus stop evangelism. Here we have people at various bus stops in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, evangelizing. And most of the time, even before starting the evangelism in words, they started with singing. This another aspect I want to talk about is the new styles of employing music for evangelism. We have the mobile and bus stop evangelism, the social media and streaming platforms. These are very, very common. The YouTube, the Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook are new spaces where evangelistic music means just songs are shared with short messages by spiritual leaders, evangelists, members of various denominations, and artists. And then we also have the short clips and reels. We have music videos with different evangelical themes. We have the virtual worship concert. This can be carried out either in studio for live performances, whereby they can have 5 minutes of musical performances, gospel songs, and then at the end of the day, audience are invited to surrender their lives to Christ. And then we have the youth culture evangelism, which is very, very common these days. We see youth of various denominations going to strategic places to evangelize, especially they do this through songs. A very good example was the one carried out by MSN Youth sometimes ago. Please. This took place in Muritala Mohammed Airport. And then we have the mobile app and WhatsApp where messages through songs were being showcased. And then now there's this. We have flyers from the past concert crusade. For example, the Light of Lagos by the Redeemed Christian Church of God. Looking at the pictures depict the founders, some ministers that will minister in words, and many gospel artists like Pastor Kunle Ajayi, Johnson, Nathaniel Bassey, and many others who will be performing. The essence is to preach the gospel in words and in songs. And the commonest of them all is the experience. The experience which is basically musical performances by gospel artists from Nigeria and outside Nigeria. And then I want to talk about the retention of music in the Great Commission of Society. Although based on the cultural shifts and technological advancements, there are lots of changes and styles. and method of using music in carrying out the Great Commission exercise. Music still stands as a major and lasting tool for evangelism in Lagos State. Do we want to talk about the functionality and the flexibility across generations? Songs and platforms ensure that it continues to pass the message of the gospel to different audiences, from the church to the street corners and also to the in this aspect of retention, that most of the old styles of music ever in this present day, they still make use of there is this integration of the old styles of music evangelism in this presentation. I also want to say that the emergence has brought a change in narrative. In other words, music is not only retained for the Great Commission exercise, but uniquely transformed in function and reach, proving efficient, effective, and relevant for both old and new evangelistic exercise. In conclusion, this study has examined the dynamic emergence of music as a tool for evangelism in Lagos State. From the old street to street mobile evangelistic, live bands to the new virtual online concerts, youth culture and social media and streaming platforms, the place of music in propagating the gospel of Christ remains profound. And the emergence from the old to the new reflects the church's continued effort to remain impactful, visible, and relevant in a changing city like Lagos. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Is the third panelist around? I can't see.
Not here.
I can't hear.
It's really and if you want yeah, that's the chair. I think it's only the chair available.
Okay. I'll make my presentation then, I think. Can you all hear me, please? So that I can know it's in the room.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. Can I share my screen? I'm not sure I can.
Yes, you can.
Okay. Okay. I'm Ifeoluwani Ilola. I'm a student at Emory University. And I'm going to be making my presentation titled Third Time's the Gimmick. Reading Ashake's vibe. So my presentation is going to be in 5 notes, and I'll just run through them from start to finish. I'm going to try to share sound. If that doesn't work, please let me know immediately, and I'm going to try to move on. So I'm going to begin. First note. Critical reception of Work of Art, the second full-length album by Nigerian pop star Ashake, Ahmed Ololade, was mixed. Some critics saw Ashake's repeated use of a signature sound, a blend of Fuji, Amapiano, and choral chants, debuted in Mr. Money with the Vibe, as a consolidation of his global stardom. While other critics declared its sameness a crude attempt to capitalize on the success of his first album. Both camps of this critical divide were tending to an aesthetic dimension of Ashake's music. its gifted integration of different elements of 21st century Nigerian pop music into a vibe. Reception of his third album, Lungu Boy, was decidedly negative. My intent in this presentation is to ponder through the work of Ashake what Nigerian popular music affirms at the level of its form. This process may sometimes feel reductive or even offensive, as if we are flaying a frog alive to figure out how it jumps. Yet, it is a task worth performing because of the possibility that we may come away with a perspective on Nigerian music that neither glorifies its ascent in the global marketplace nor derides its sexual content at the mediocre limit of its possibility. This work follows, is in spirit if not in form, the work of scholars of Nigerian popular culture like Tejimola Olaniyan, whose attempt to situate Fela's music in its cultural, artistic, and historical context offers a model for thinking through the contradictions inherent in the interplay between form and content of Nigerian music. We may never fully unravel the hidden digital and financial forces that determine the texture of our cultural life. By critically attending to what artists have made through and despite these forces, perhaps we make a better image of our present. I'm going to try to play a few sounds. Please just let me know immediately if they can't get through. So all of these tracks, 6 in number from the Ashake's first album. And what I'll do is play just a very few bars from the opening of each song. What I'm asking us to do is to pay attention to how similar these sounds are.
We can't hear sound.
Okay, that's good. Thank you for letting me know. I'm just going to move on. Okay, I'm going to try sharing again, but if the sound doesn't work, I'm just going to move on. Okay. So the formal elements of Ashake style, which for much of this paper we will equate to its vibe, are already fully formed in the 4 songs of this eponymous EP, Ololade Ashake. The first track, Trabaye, takes the choral chant of Alujo, which is very well established in Nigerian gospel, and energizes it with the frenetic rhythms of Fuji and its literary style of layering slangs and enthusiastic non sequiturs until they sediment into a mood that communicates a sensibility, which would have come to label as streets in the Nigerian context. In the second and third tracks, Shunga and Omokpe, featuring Olamide, introduces the shaker and log drums of our piano, a percussive leitmotif that will evolve into the signature intro to most of his songs. In his debut album, Mr. Money with the Vibe, this formal element combined with a near-perfect absorption of the preceding 3 decades of Nigerian popular music, sometimes in lyrical citations, and other times explicitly stylistic references. Take Peace Be Unto You, one of the Amapiano tracks that make up the first half of the album. In the chorus, Ashake sings, Assalamu alaikum, I get many, many disciples, Mutaka Oshidanu. Oluwa shower me with your blessings times 2. Oh, the jowo jowo go down. In every situation, make I no lose. Emi Oshako mo alone. Check out Bisa. Thank you. This chorus contains prayers that are very typical of Fuji. There's a rejection of poverty, there's a plea for blessing, there's a desire to make it alongside his friends. But sandwiched into this is the line in your Shakomo alone, a syncopation that references Shakomo, a 1999 song by the group The Remedies. This reference is the callback to the early days of what will become the dominant form of Nigerian popular music in the 21st century. Shakomo interpolates American rapper MC Lyte Keep On Keeping On, released in 1996, to the point of an outright ripoff. By the time Ashake would arrive on the musical scene, Nigerian artists no longer raided American music charts with impunity, searching for radio hits. Yet, still a tendency towards pastiche remains. The internet has bridged the gap between American music charts and Nigerian airwaves, such that the kind of audacious copying that is performed at the start of the century is now met with accusations of theft. So rather than grabbing other people's songs to make his own, Ashake scatters references across his debut album to produce a postmodern jukebox of Nigerian popular music from the 1990s. Since the time of the Remedies, Nigerian popular music has undergone many transformations. Following that era of looking to the United States for models, artists like Nice and Olamide, head of Ashake's record label, artists like Nice made an abrupt turn to Yoruba music, especially Fuji for lyrics and sonic form. A template rappers like Olamide, head of Ashake's record label, would eventually perfect in the embrace of the appellation local rappers. This is an abridged version of this story of that stylistic transformation, but it contains a kernel of the reality that Nigerian pop music, always in search of influences, turned at first to hip hop, then to local genres like Fuji. Scholars like Tosin Bogi have charted its evolutions, which led in the mid-2010s to another foray outside the country's borders. First to Ghana, via the adoption of slower beats per minute of Ghanaian hip life, through the work of the producer Jules and artist Mr. Easy, and later the wholesale adoption of that catchy form of South African house music, amapiano. The lower BPMs of Ghanaian hip life will become a valuable factor in the proliferation of music we have come to call Afrobeats. On one hand, the chill music was more danceable, but it was also key to the production of another thing, what we know as chill vibes. The novelist Elif Batuman, writing about musician Ezra Konig's blog titled Internet Vibes, describes vibe as such. A vibe turns out to be something like local color with a historical dimension. What gives a vibe authenticity is its ability to evoke, using a small number of disparate elements, a certain time, place, and milieu, a certain nexus of historic, geographic, and cultural forces. The sound scholar Robin James structures the structure of vibe to the state of music platforms. Writes, quotes, studying the ways music streaming services, Spotify and Apple Music use vibes as a category for organizing music. These services push vibes over genre in order to get us to hear music the way their algorithms do. End of quote. In James's account, vibes are not just a unit of authenticity, but a driver of consumption patterns on digital media platforms. The curator Melanie Beulah similarly connects the category of the vibe to the advent of algorithmically driven social media. She writes, the current cultural moment of the vibe is also inextricably linked to Instagram and above TikTok. Vibe is often used in this text with reference to images or videos that capture very particular moods through the aggregation of other images. By qualifying something with a vibe, you tap into a specific aggregate add to it. Well, association of vibe platforms have been associated with the audience. Fuji vibration, a variation of one of the coinages in Fuji discourse, which Steve Nabanji Boluwadi describes as a revalidation of the genre's idealized eccentricities, well predates Ashake's entry in the music industry. So before Mr. Money's vibe became associated with amapiano, it had always been rooted in Fuji, a genre with vibrations. Despite this historical precedence, the triumph of Ashake's vibe allows us to understand its musical style as something other than genre, as a gimmick. In a historical moment when, according to Liz Kelly in her book Nude Machine, The Rise of Spotify and the Costs of the Perfect Playlist, vibes have become synonymous with algorithmically curated platforms that transforms art into mere content. It is Ashake's insistently repetitive use of its vibe that transforms it from mere style into gimmick. Gimmick here describes the aesthetic form by which Ashake produces his music, but also our judgment of that form. And judgment here is not just a critical response we arrive at when we think about the music, but our spontaneous affective reaction to the feeling that by the second and the third albums, Ashake is not just producing a vibe, but is overusing it. In theory of the gimmick, judgment and capitalist form, Cultural theorist Tianai describes the gimmick this way. Quotes, always dubious, if never unappealing, the gimmick wears many faces. It can be a catchy hook, a time-worn joke, a labor-saving contraption. Gimmicks are fundamentally one thing across these instances. Overrated devices that strike us as working too little, that is labor-saving tricks, but also working too hard, strained efforts to get our attention. In each case, we refer to the aesthetically suspicious object as a contrivance, an ambiguous term equally applicable to ideas, technique, and things. In many ways, the history of Nigerian popular music is a story of gimmicks. First, the rip-offs, then the dances, then the blending of other African genres. In the time when dances were the path to virality, Alanta, Azonto, Etigi, Galala, Skelewu, Shaku Shaku, Shoki, Yauze, Zanku, these were all devices contrived to get the attention of an audience that was often too eager to pursue the next thing. Not only were artists producing songs in beats that could induce dances, the form of those dances themselves were informing the lyric and the structure of the songs. Some of these aforementioned dances preceded the spread of the internet on the African continent. Yet in the ability to induce virality through the social function of gestures that can be decoded, learned, and reproduced to different aesthetic results, they anticipated the rise of algorithms and prefigured their function. In other words, Nigerian artists were poised to take advantage of digital platforms and the rise of algorithmically circulated art because they were already deft in the deployment of gimmicks, of attention-seeking contrivances. We do not need to claim Ashake's style has always been a gimmick because that would be false. On the contrary, his debut album was so inventive, it offered the promise of a transformation of what is possible in Nigerian music. Yet, by the third album, Lungu Boy, his repetitive use of that inventive style had transformed into gimmick par excellence. His perpetual place at the top of the chart of digital platforms in Nigeria is a confirmation that his labor-saving device did its job. Critics could be troubled by the refusal to transform his style, but in choice within the context of an industry where the rising number of listeners was a prime marker of success, Ajake remains vindicated. And here's my conclusion. I consider Ashake's music emblematic of art making in the age of algorithms. This means that the music he produces is not just an integration of his musical influences, Fuji, Amapiano, Alujo, Juju, or a reflection of his cultural condition from which he proceeds, Lagos or the streets. There's a third element to this analysis, the digital platforms through which the music circulates, Spotify, TikTok, and Instagram. If we remain at the level of cultural analysis, we are bound to produce erroneous concepts like those articulated by some contemporary Nigerian critics, who take the proliferation of plaintive songs of lament in the 2020s as the arrival of a new genre of Nigerian music called Afro-Adura. Nigerian artists have always expressed their desires as prayers, and Ashake is no exemption. That they now seem to do it all the time does not make a new genre. If we take the overall context of the form and content of Nigerian music into consideration, alongside the structure of digital platforms under which artists strive to be heard, and known, then our understanding of the sound they produce can escape the allure of novelty that makes us invent new genres every time disparate influences are blended. As literary and cultural critic, Akinde Shoko asserts in his book Everything is Sampled, Digital and Print Mediations in African Arts and Letters, quote, examining a song through categories such as genre and style fosters a distinctive form of attention. But so do the digital platforms that mediate our consumption of these genres. If we surrender to the genre blending in narrative platforms and take fusion as its natural and sometimes vibratory form, then the horizons of our analysis are limited to the wings of those who control the platforms. We can and should produce better analysis of Nigerian music by understanding the formal affordance of these digital structures by which the music circulates. That kind of analysis may approach the supplementary mode of analysis that Adeshoko calls for in his text, where we supplement our analysis of cultural origins with an understanding of how platforms work and shape the cultures. In the case of Ashake, we may proceed by asking, as I have done here, why does he continue to blend Amapiano with Fuji to produce his vibe? And what is our reaction to this persistent use of that blended vibe? If, despite our suspicion that in vibe has become a gimmick, we cannot stop vibing, then the loss of control is a worthy place to begin our questions. Thank you. I'm not sure how much of that you got, but I tried to just power through it. So, can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes, but
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so if people in the room have questions for any of the panelists, can we please just raise them? As many people as have questions, can you please just ask them? And we can come around to like, everybody can just take down the questions as we can get them. I don't want us to kind of go back and forth with the questions. So if there's anybody in the room that has questions, please, this might be the time to raise them.
Any questions? Questions? Recommendations? No?
yes. I have a question.
Sir, can you hear?
It's not very clear. If they can move close to the microphone.
Yes, my question goes to Ife Oluba. Yes, I love the
Okay.
fact, yes, I appreciate your narrative to Achake's music. I'm like everything we always say, the structure of our music, our papers. I know that you started from the narrative part. You didn't really talk on the theoretical framework of your work so that you know how you analyze your work. So that is my question, that maybe you should put structure to it. But I could see that you analyze the work literally, but the structure of it is what I'm concerned about. And also to raise to what I love your work because I was carried away because it's well structured, and I also learned from it as a upcoming scholar too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? And also, please, the name of the person who spoke now, if it's possible. Oh, okay. Chijioke is here. Hold on. Are you ready to present? I think we still have time for the last presenter.
Yeah, no. My name appeared in two panels.
Oh, okay.
and
So yeah, that's fine. We're kind of good. We're just taking questions.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, any other question?
Well, I want to speak to am I first to Dr. Loco. Thank you for your presentation. I don't know if she's on. Okay, but she's not responding anyway. Well, she had even said that she would love to hear comments from the room. She sent a message to me. So I just wanted to find out, you're talking about evangelizations and music serving as a way to go by this. I'm wondering if what's under music studies, where we would place this the sacred musicology, and what exactly would be not the contribution, but basically what are you driving at in terms of music scholarship? I don't know if you can hear me. Okay, so the second Niniola, thank you for your presentation. But I would have really loved to hear the music because, in essence, that's where you're drawing your comparison from. If it's not going to come from the slides, maybe you could give us links to, what you're comparing, because you're trying to compare four different music, I guess. But this didn't come to fruition in the presentation. Yeah, that's just my.
Okay, any other question? I don't know if Dr. Loco heard the question that was directed at her, but is there any other question in the room?
Any other question?
Is someone speaking? If someone is speaking, I can't hear.
No other question, but you can proceed with answers you want ask.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know if Dr. Loco wants to go ahead first, if she can hear me at all. Okay. I can go ahead and if she's not here yet. Yeah, so to the question of the kind of structure of my work, or perhaps like the notion of a theoretical framework. And I think I can combine that also with the problem of not being able to hear the music. So basically what I've done is to take it's almost like a close reading of the music. And so it's not very dissimilar um, to what the first speaker did with the music. So if anybody has access to any kind of the debut album, Ashake's debut album, what I'm asking us to do is to kind of listen to the first few bars of the songs. So pay attention to the first few bars of the song and try to listen to how they introduce them. The Amapiano tracks all sound very similar. And you can do this over Ashake's 3 albums. You begin to realize that at some point, what is very exciting about Ashake's music, which is this combination of style, becomes very still. It becomes gimmicky. So you begin to wonder why it's doing the same thing again and again. And it is that simple impulse that I'm trying to analyze as something that tells us something about the structure of the music itself. So yes, I can send slides if the organizers want me to send my slides. But at its core, really what I'm asking is that half of the songs in the first album sound a particular way. And if you listen to the first few bars of those songs, you begin to notice that there's a similarity in the kind of formal structure of it. And that similarity tells us something about the content of the music. And that's to the extent to which is the theoretical framework for this, that's the theoretical framework. The other side of the analysis is the part that then suggests that that structure of the song tells us something about the way it is produced, which is that it tells us something about the nature of making music in the age of algorithms. So the fact that this music sounds very similar isn't just because Ashake is not inventive, or it is not just because Ashake does not know what it's doing. In fact, Ashake knows what it's doing, and it's producing music as an artist who has to produce music for algorithms. And my notion at a very kind of large top-down idea is that artists who produce music in the age of algorithms have to produce formal structures that we sometimes will perceive as they are making gimmicks. But the gimmick itself is the necessity of the algorithmic form. So that's my big structure. I don't know if that made it any clearer, and I'm sorry that the sound couldn't come through. I've been sent an email, and I'll try to send the slides to the email, and we can try to kind of put the music together. Yes. Is there any other question in the room? If there's no other question, I do have questions for some of the panelists too, and I guess I can try to use that to close us out. Any other questions?
No.
No. Okay. I was perhaps going to ask, is it Dr. Grace? Is it okay to say Dr. Grace?
Yeah, it's fine.
I was going to ask, yes, thank you. I was going to ask about, you said there were parts of the presentation that you couldn't expand upon. And I think it was particularly interesting to listen to you compare art music composition to a second-hand product. Does that mean that there's no way to think about artists? Because I know there have been people who have suggested that art music is itself a kind of indigenous music to Nigeria because of the way it's been practiced. And I wanted to listen to you say more about thinking about art music composition as a second-hand product, what that means if we can try to analyze it broadly.
Okay, well, perhaps you didn't hear me clearly. I threw an open-ended question. Yeah, and so I'm neither here or there. But, looking at the music in question, the music used as metaphoric examples of these continuities and discontinuities, following the narrative of the musical composition. My question, which throws light to art music scholarships scholarship and the way we think about it is to ask that I mean my reading poses the question to whether the composers, that's Oyedo's work, using a Western medium can be described as an investment in, what we will call white cultural attachment. And if we describe it as that, the ethical and cultural implications that concerns the message in the works, what ethical and cultural implications are concerned in this work the composer himself wishes to convey. It is in that regard that I threw the question, whereas Oyedu's conventional style is art music, which is Western. Yet it is original and inventive in the ways I've talked about: the composition, the word painting, the tone painting, the glittering runs, and all of those analysis. On a meta level, I mentioned that the work goes beyond the mere critique of what seemed like a simple ethical equation, but it encourages us to ask whether second-hand is, and what second-hand actually is, and what cultural contributions from colonial encounters, extended through unequal economic conditions that governs power relations between the West and Nigeria. I wouldn't know if you really got that part of it, or if I actually
Yes, I
answered.
did. I did.
Yeah. So
Yes, I did.
it's
And I think I have some notion of the answer.
okay.
Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I was just trying to ask you to expand a little upon it because I thought it was
Okay.
because in
Okay.
some way it goes counter some of the scholarship that would take art music as just almost indigenous because of its long history on the continent and how much
Well,
it's like
in essence,
already.
what I concluded is Oyedo's Tokumbo itself, clearly tells us that Tokumbo suggests that musically the answer is far from clear. We cannot say it's
Okay.
second hand. We cannot say it isn't. So thank you.
Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you. Do we still have any questions? Is Dr. Loco available now? I think I saw that she popped up on Zoom.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Okay,
Before,
please, yeah, go on.
okay, should I go ahead?
Yes, please. I'm sure that if they can hear you in
Hello.
the room, I think you can go on with the question.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I heard you talk about Ashake's music, talking about
Yes.
sculpture. Yeah. I just wanted to understand if you meant that the repetition of a particular structure, of an
Yeah.
instrumental structure he has designed for himself, if you are looking at that as a form of an identity, or is he trying to pass any other conscious message that maybe we do not know of? I just
Okay.
wanted you to clarify me on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to suggest is whereas in the past, the kind of repetitive nature of Nigerian music, and it's always been repetitive, so it's not a thing that is new to Ashake. The repetitive nature of Nigerian music in a different context historically can sometimes be attributed to the fact that people are making music for dance. Sometimes it's attributed to the kind of local identity of the music. So if Fuji artist is going to be producing songs, it's going to sound like Fuji. That's an affordance that is not necessary in the age of the kind of algorithmically produced songs. So when you're producing song for a global marketplace, you can make any kind of song you want, right? So maybe the most successful artist in the streaming era is Drake. And Drake's calling card is the fact that he goes around the world making music of different styles. Yet Ashake is over 3 years, 2022, 2023, 2024, Ashake was the most streamed artist in Nigeria. And what I'm saying is the fact that the most streamed artist in Nigeria keeps repeating the structure of his song tells us something about what it means to produce music in the kind of algorithm era. And so what I'm saying is, whereas in the past, you might think about the fact that they are making the same music because they want people to dance. In this case, it's not just dancing, but we also have to factor in the fact that making music on Spotify, a platform where the way to get into most people's listening ears is by being curated by algorithms. And this algorithm works on vibes, right? So the idea that Ashake is Mr. Money with the vibe, and what he's always producing is a vibe, kind of aligns with the fact that when you make music on Spotify, have to make music that has a vibe. And the vibe is a specifically structural form that in so many ways I'm suggesting is part of what is informing the repetition that we hear. So when we hear Ashake do the same thing again and again and again and again over 3 albums in 3 years, right? So in 3 years, he has produced 3 albums, and those 3 albums have about 38 tracks. And of those 38 tracks, over half of them begin the same way. At that point, we should begin to ask questions about what algorithms are doing to the structure of the music. That's the key of what I'm trying to explain. And that we can
All
expand the
right.
analysis beyond Ashake, but I'm only starting with Akash Ashake.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. Did you do any sort of interview with Ashake or with any producer close to him before you arrived at this? What I would say, it's not a conclusion, but a theory or hypothesis. Yeah.
Yes. So, in so many ways, sure, I've done interviews with artists in the past, and I have recorded interviews with artists. But the fact that I have those interviews actually do not factor into the analysis. What I'm trying to suggest is that when you make music in any kind of era, so when you're making music when people are dancing, whether you like it or not, you have to make music that people will dance. Otherwise, you will not be successful. So the only people who are successful are the people who have made the kind of music that get into the form that we're expecting. So if everybody is dancing and you choose not to make music for dancing, nobody's going to listen to your music. And so when we analyze the music of the person that is basically music for dancing, we don't have to interview them and ask, did you intentionally make music for dancing? We know they have made music for dancing, is why they're successful. It's a very similar thing with Ashake. Sure, we can begin to ask him and he might tell us he's making different things. So there are interviews Ashake has given where they have asked him why is he doing the same thing. And he says that's his style. Why should he change his style? And so in some ways, we can interview him and he can give us right answers. He can lie to us. It does not matter whether he lies to us or not. We have the evidence of the music and the kind of data, however very little it is, that the streaming platforms produce. So in
Okay.
itself, there's sufficient evidence in that number that we are able to access.
Yeah, okay. I get you. Why I'm asking this is that one may run into the risk of drawing conclusions without sort of gaining a substantial evidence for it. So that's what I'm asking. Is there a data that proves? I mean, from the other side, especially from the side of the person who you're talking about, that proves that
Yes.
this thing could be true. And we can't also be so sure that the person is lying if the person says something else, because I'm also driving at how conscious, what level of consciousness is given to this thing that you're talking about. That's why I'm asking all this. Yeah.
Yeah, well, these are wonderful questions. But so before I became a person who studies in graduate school, part of what I used to do as a person who was doing music journalism was to wait on artists and ask them questions, and they will give you answers. And however, the level of answers they gave you, whether it was right or wrong, what you still needed to do is take those answers back and compare to a different kind of evidence. And here, what I'm suggesting is that we do not know. In the same way that we don't know what goes on in people's minds, we actually don't know what goes on with Spotify or algorithms. We don't know how Instagram decides who is the most successful person. And so
Yeah.
at some point, we want to make meaning of our lives and want to make meaning of the way that we consume music. And yet we do not have access to how to understand how these things are being fed to us. So it's like a grand structure of how do we make sense of what is to us? If every day I open my phone, I listen to music, I like music. Sometimes I'm like, I don't like this music. Suddenly I find myself that I'm listening to it and I can sing the song. What has happened to me? It's part of the question. And my argument is part of what has happened to us is that there are ways in which the structure of what we listen to conditions how we consume and produce it. And again, Ashake is the only example, but I think we can make the analysis of anybody who makes music on the internet. What they've done, they've produced works that we can analyze. And the same way we will be able to analyze a novel without talking to the author of the novel, we can analyze music text and music form without interacting with the author, which is not to dismiss what the authors can say. One of the most insightful experiences I've had was in a conversation I had with Mr. Easy. And perhaps like the first person who helped me understood what happens with Spotify. But that's because it's generous. Someone else might not be able to tell me that. But the thing I have to be able to do is to take whatever information I have and try to analyze it. Not because Mr. Easy is going to be mad at me or Ashake is going to be mad at me, but because I need to make sense of how I am consuming music. And I think we all need to make sense of it. And the thing we have is the thing we can work with. I'm sorry that we've taken time, but really thank you. I appreciate those questions. They say we have a minute left. Is there any final word in the room? Thank you to all the panelists. Yes.
Hello.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Loco.
Yes, please. Can I have the question?
Okay. Please, if you took the question down in the room, can you please send it to Dr. Loco? I did not realize she was not getting the questions as they were being asked.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate the questions.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for this question.